Hi and welcome to the Digital Accessibility Podcast with me, your host, Joe James. Throughout this series, I will be interviewing professionals who work within the space to share their expertise, journeys and general thoughts on the key issues facing the industry today. My aim is to provide an in-depth look into the world of digital accessibility and the impact it has on the lives of anyone who interacts with digital technology. Our goal is to bridge the skills gap in the current market and inspire others to join the movement towards a more accessible digital world. So whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, I hope that this platform will provide you with valuable insights and practical advice from experts and advocates in this extremely important community. Today I'm joined by Ronny Hendriks, who is the Head of Accessibility at Nomensa. Nomensa are a strategic UX agency based in Bristol, London and Amsterdam. They work hard to create groundbreaking experiences that make a measurable difference to the way that people live. Ronny has been with the accessibility team at Nomensa for almost 2 years now, working with some huge brands and clients across a variety of industries. He also provides talks and webinars on a regular basis to increase awareness of what we can all be doing to ensure a more accessible world for everyone. So welcome to the podcast, Ronny.
Hi, Joe. Yeah, thank you for having me here today on the podcast. Thrilled to be chatting some accessibility with you. Um, like you said, Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Um, so yeah, an amazing opportunity every year to bring another further bit of awareness to this amazing field of work. There's of course countless of online and offline activities going on across the space and across the globe. But yeah, glad to bring some of that on your podcast today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here, and as someone that's I think quite well known across the space with your talks and webinars. So really, it's an honour to have you talking on this episode. It's great that it's the 12th annual Global Accessibility Awareness Day, or GAAD. Great that there is a full day just to celebrate the advances that we've had so far, but there's still a way to go, as we both know. So yeah, we will. I'm sure we'll speak a bit more about that as we go through the episode.
We probably will, yes.
So we met recently, had a great chat, put the world to rights. It wasn't all digital accessibility, but that was the main focus, I suppose. And I'm sure we'll do the same again today. But to save us sort of going off topic, I'm going to try and stick to some preset questions to keep us on track, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that should be fine. By all means, try and keep me on the rails.
I'll try my very best. So I guess I'd like to start by discussing or asking you how your journey into accessibility began. And I believe you started out studying IT and development from quite a young age.
Yeah, I did. So yeah, right into the deep end. Well, that is correct. I did, and I've been around computers for as long as I can remember, really, which eventually led me to study in IT. Um, was a pretty broad one though. It contained both the hard and the software side. So we did a lot of fiddling around with Cisco routers and programming all at the same time, really. Um, and then my initial contact with accessibility was I in my final year I developed repeated stress injury RSI problems, having of course ignored all of the symptoms that go ahead, like tingling fingers and all that jazz. And that was my really first time interaction that accessibility came into my viewing perspective. And I needed to change the way I was working, um, and yeah, I found that it was really hard to to work even with the programs and the web pages that I was building at the time, which yeah. Was pretty confrontational to say the least. So
Mm.
yeah, into transitioning, I dabbled into speech recognition to maybe help with writing my papers, um, and that's I think, looking back, still one of the things that baffles me the most. That looking at well, now you click on a microphone on your mobile device, and it will basically transcribe whatever like even me as a not native English person, I
Mm.
can dictate in English and it'll recognize my speech in pretty high fidelity, without it needing any sort of like training or onboarding. Um, but back then, like a good 20 years ago, when I dabbled with Dragon at the time, I had to spend countless and countless hours trying to train the software to recognize my voice. And then I was in a different space, didn't bring my headset with me, so I had to work with the onboard microphone, and you were basically back at square one again. Um, and it didn't matter whether that was Dutch or English, like very laborious process to get that running.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we often forget, right? It's like, yes, there's a lot happening, but we've already come very far in the past 2 decades, and that speed of progress, that just seems to be picking up.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's just I mean, I wanted to just mention something there on when you said that you're not a native English speaker. I've got to say that your English is much better than my Dutch would be.
I
So
hear that
it's
a
a
lot.
it's a good thing
Yeah.
that that I'm not trying to do this podcast in Dutch, but maybe we can transcribe and translate it for a Dutch audience as well.
Yeah, I can probably do a bit of translation there.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so anyways, heading back to that like intro into accessibility. After dealing with repeated stress injury for about a year, trying to recover, and I was really debating, like, should I really be continuing to work in the IT sector? Would that be like really the wisest choice for me? Mostly from a physical point of view.
Mm.
And at the time, I decided not to, and to change course. I've always been like a people person. I've had interest in psychology, sociology, sociology. Wow,
Sociology?
yeah, sociology.
Is that it? How you say it?
No,
Even
that,
I mean, I
yeah,
am a native English speaker, and I
it's
can't say it.
that's there's those types of words that I just cannot articulate well. Um, but yeah, to pick it up, so I had that interest, and I switched into a social work direction. Um, and I think that to this day, that has probably been one of the most valuable choices of the time, as that really put a foundation into play, on yeah, what turned me further in on my current work with accessibility, and what drives me, just learning more about how people function, not only in a physical way, but also in a mental way, and like things like dealing with adversities. And to be honest, it helped myself a lot as well. Um, it would prove a lot quicker though that I wanted than, because like a good 3 years in, the repeated stress injury flared up again really badly at the time. Um, that so much that, and very quickly, like in a matter of weeks, I was basically unable to do most physical activities that included my hands. Like drinking was hard. Like cooking food, peeling potatoes, that kind of thing, was near impossible for quite a while. Um, and I had to basically drop out and stop my social work study, which, to this day still pains me a bit, not having
Mm.
finished that. But by the time I recovered that, to a point where I could probably pick it back up again, so many years had gone by that I would basically have to start all over again, which I've not done yet. Um, but yeah, so I would spend about the next 4 years basically recovering, before I like started reintegrating back into work. Um, yeah,
Wow. And that's, yeah, so an awful long time to be suffering with that, and then like you said, working on, or like you said, I think you've mentioned it just now, utilizing accessibility features and things to help you with day-to-day sort of living. And did you do that throughout those 4 years of recovery? I'm assuming that you delved
yeah,
even deeper.
yeah, it was in those years where, like, especially in the beginning, I had to fall back on what I had already discovered in the years before, but because of the high severity of the pain I was dealing with, and the being physically incapable of doing much, I had to further explore options that were out there, in terms of other types of peripherals, for example, to be able to make a living situation possible, and to still be able to use a computer to a point where you could do things like your taxes, and
Mm,
explore avenues of work, look up treatments. All of that information was digital, and especially at the time, repeated stress injury wasn't like a well-known thing. So I had a really hard time getting any diagnosis done um, properly. So that took a lot of online research as well, which
mm,
I needed accessibility features for. And then you only run into further problems, really. So that's when I yeah, started getting more exposed to, okay, what to, if I need this, there's other people that need this, and what is required to make that happen. So that's when I got exposed to the web content accessibility guidelines, and things like that. And that's basically when everything that started rolling
mm.
on from there on out. Yeah.
And that's, I suppose, with you, we hear this a lot in the digital accessibility community. It's your own lived experience, right? It's something that you've experienced. You've felt the need for um, an additional feature or an accessibility feature to help you to access information. And it's paramount that it just goes to show that those that need access to something like the World Wide Web to look into treatments, to look into diagnoses, to look into how they can just live a more comfortable life without having to resort to, oh, I'll need to go to my GP or my doctor, I need to go to the library to look up, and maybe we shouldn't suggest self-diagnosing on the podcast,
No, no,
but
no. I would very much advise against that.
however, it's something that we would take for granted. So someone else may take for granted. Um, just having that simple access to be able to Google, or use a search engine of someone's
Of
preference
their choice.
to
Yeah.
to be able to look up information. And it
Yeah.
seems like such a simple feature, um, but actually it's not as easy for everyone to be able to use. But I digress. But that's so. I guess if you don't mind, would you mind delving into a little bit more about your experience of repetitive stress injury or strain injury, and how it's shaped your outlook on digital and assistive technologies, or how it's even then? I mean, you've mentioned slightly already, but how it's shaped your career and your goals and objectives, because it's already changed due to that. But
Yeah. 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 Sure. Yeah. So, like I said, it's basically having RSI was my gateway into the world of accessibility, and a rather confrontational one at that. Uh, so first there was the initial situation where I was unable to do my day-to-day things, um, like I could previously do all of those with ease. I had no known disabilities or specific access needs, and all of a sudden they were there. Um, that's one part of the confrontation. Um, I've also had to dr- it's a bit of a drive, really, for whatever I was doing with, or wanting to do with, my IT study, to put that to a greater good in general. Um, so I quickly had that realization that the things that I was building and trying to do, and I was trying to do a good thing,
mm,
but they were already excluding people, um, at the time, including myself. I was practically unable to use whatever I had built at the time. Um, so that's the other confrontational part, where, okay, like, if I'm struggling with this, like, gonna need to change a couple of things to make that happen. So I started exploring like the capabilities of what was out there at the time, um, and it's it like we're talking like a good 20 years ago. So things like look promising, like I discussed earlier, like with Dragon, for example, which looked great, and I was like, yes, this will help me finish my education.
Mm.
Um, so it looked really promising, but then if the sport's not there, it still goes unutilized.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as I found my way through learning to live with RSI and recovering some capability, did this whole new world, as we said, open up to me. And at the time, I was still very much planning on getting back into web development
Mhm.
when I would recover, as I saw it, as an and we're talking like the period past my social work study, because I really saw the opportunity of okay, if I can recover myself, I can start again creating things that are then no longer excluding people. So I still wanted to get back into web development, which meant I started learning about accessibility and how I could better support it, and I started experimenting with like other tools and peripherals like screen readers and switches, just to be able to see, okay, how can I make this work with what I'm creating?
Mm.
Um, and like most people that I meet nowadays, they don't know that I have this condition, and it's still very much something that I deal with every single day. Um, it's always been a weak spot over the past decades, and it'll always remain a weak spot as well. So as a result of it, I have a nerve damage, which is runs bilaterally from my neck into both arms. Um, and that means that like I have like a burning slash tingling sensation pretty much 24/7. Um,
Wow.
if you sorry.
I said, wow, it's just awful, and you wouldn't, like you say, it's invisible. You wouldn't know that you're
Yeah,
experiencing that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's also a pretty was a pretty big revelation for myself. Like this, like I'm having this, I'm having trouble explaining it to people. They don't see it. They don't see the impact of it. Um, I'll get to the impact in a bit, but yeah, it was a very big revelation for me. Like, okay, it's not only um, about like it's not only people with physical disabilities. Like there's so much hidden um, adversities that people struggle with that you might have zero clue about.
Mm.
So what it currently means for me, having been like quote unquote recovered, like I'm able to do my work. I work pretty much full time, if not more, and I'm doing well. Um, but there's that ever burning sensation still lingering in my body, that if you'd put a pain scale to it, like a 1 to 10 scale, I'll probably be on a 4 on an average day. So that's considered like the low end of moderate pain, um, which is, not gonna lie, pretty annoying still. But you somehow learn to live with it a bit.
Yeah.
um, it'll never it's always present, um, but it's still noticeable even after all those years. And then on a bad day, you'd probably look at like a 6 or so, which means it's really hard for me to ignore, and will probably I'll probably start avoiding certain activities. Um, and if it gets worse than that, then other people will start to know. Like I'm pretty transparent in how I feel and what I'm capable of. Um, Mostly because I've been burned out twice because of it, like ignoring it and then just chugging along,
Yeah.
which doesn't help. So you learn to be honest with yourself, really. Um, and then, but yeah, those bad days, luckily, like I've learned a lot about myself, and we've come a long way in terms of like other ways of operating computers. Like if my keyboard and my mouse are not the tools of the trade for the day, then I can happily switch to an iPad and keep on doing things in a different format,
Yeah.
which wasn't possible 20 years ago. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And it's some again these invisible things that we come past every day, and you just think, wow, it's um and again, you're mentioning we've come a long way. It's a lot better in terms of what is available to you in terms of different technologies, different tools, and sort of features and things that you can use as well. But again, so I guess even it's a fascinating, and it's a terrible story. Like, it's horrible to hear that you've had to go through that. So I'm sorry that that's been the case, but you've shown great resolve obviously over the last 2 decades to get to sort of where you are currently in your work. So I'm assuming that has also shaped sort of what you want to do with your career and your own objectives as well.
Yeah, it definitely has. It's it's definitely given me like an open mind about what access needs are,
Mm,
and how that differs from person to person. Um, there's no way for me to know what it means for someone else to have a disability. Um, and even then, if you like uh, the experience and the need, the access needs that someone has will differ from the ones I have and from the ones that the next person will have. Um, to and that to that point, like the concepts of accessibility and more so maybe even like inclusive design are key ones, because like you're enabling whatever you're creating for the biggest possible group of people.
mm,
Um, so I think to answer like the initial question on how this shaped my career, um, it's by now pretty clear that without RSI, I've not even sure I would have ended up in this space and where I am now. Um, and doing like the enabling work that we're doing, so others can benefit from that as well. So I'd probably be on the receiving end of the effort that the industry puts out, instead,
mm,
much like most of our clients are. And that's what pretty much drives me, because there's still so many people out there that are like unaware of the capabilities they have, to make their own products more inclusive. Like I've learned that the hard way, and if I can save someone a little bit of that effort and give them like tools and tips to start working on more inclusive products, I think that's
mm.
pretty much what drives me, really.
And it's almost doubly rewarding. It's rewarding in the sense that you're helping so many hundreds of thousands of people really with access to certain clients' tools and products and services um, that they may not have had without your input, but also rewarding for yourself for future reference. And we are an aging population that are using technology, so everyone's going to have additional needs as they grow older. But I mean, it's again, sorry to hear about your struggles with RSI, but it's great to hear that you've come through the other end and you're still doing some great work, and you're turning it into a positive, which is a wonderful thing to see and hear about. And I mean, when we last met, I spoke about my imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
And it comes to this podcast and supporting digital accessibility. As someone with no visible or known disabilities or additional needs, who is Joe James? Who is this guy putting his voice and thoughts out to the community? And I think it is a big problem in the industry. Um, um, I don't know. Have you had any experience of imposter syndrome? As much as I know that you've had your struggles, but they're not maybe known by many people that you work with.
Um, yeah, I mean, imposter syndrome can be a really difficult thing to deal with, indeed. And I think it's only gotten worse over the past 2 decades. especially with the rise of social media, it's like it exposes you to so many other people's, even in this space, and they do such amazing work day to day that it's often hard. You start comparing and things get difficult. So but on the other hand, like social media also often has the tendency to highlight like a very vocal minority. Like if you're in the algorithm, you're in the algorithm. The type of deal maybe. So it's not really uncommon to have thoughts like right, who am I to even add to this accessibility narrative really. Um, there's also a bit where I feel people in general, especially online, but also in the accessibility space, sometimes can be harsh or maybe quick to judge. Um, to give an example, I mean, I'll reject or advise against the usage of overlays as a solution for web accessibility, like every single day. But I've also seen people recently get like virtually almost condemned because they've made um, a misinformed on their end decision to include one and posted about it like in a way like this is what we're doing to help accessibility, um, and then people like cracking down on it um, in a very harsh way because it like we're in this space because we are passionate about it and we want the solutions to be the right ones. um, but it makes me really sad if we then crack down on someone because they've made a misinformed decision. Um,
Mm.
it's not really helping in a positive way, and it reinforces that feeling of imposter syndrome that it gives you. Like what if I make a mistake, right? What if I accidentally advise someone incorrectly, or I give them an advice and um, I totally in the moment forgot about the other accessibility challenge that solution might impose, and like now one problem is solved, but they now have another problem to deal with.
Yeah.
And then getting cracked down on that. I mean, that's it's uh, yeah. So I think it's good to remember that even for yourself, Joe, like you're someone wearing glasses, and like we discussed last time, like you need them to be able to do your day-to-day living, which means you already represent like what, 2/3 of the population. um it's like everyone's likely to need, like the majority of people is likely to need glasses somewhere during their life. um and like the precise need might differ. You might have farsightedness or short-sightedness or stigmatism. Like nobody can tell what kind of glasses you're wearing from the outside.
True.
Um,
I
so
feel a
yeah,
lot less lonely.
yeah, you should definitely, yeah. And the same goes for myself. Like people that that meet me for the first time, like I'm almost 2 meters tall, and I'm pretty big. Like they see a tall, wide Dutch giant, but they know nothing about my daily struggles that we talked about. Uh, so I really feel that someone's deeds will show their intent. And if your words or your actions reach someone that others haven't reached, then that's a win in my book. That's someone else that is now more aware of accessibility and the need for inclusive design. That's one more than we had yesterday.
It's so it's the intent behind what we're doing. Like you
Yeah.
said about the overlays, someone has tried their best. That's the best. They've got some very good salespeople that are prompting people the use of overlays on people's websites, because it seems like a one size fits all solution to make your website accessible to to those with any additional needs. But as we know, it can actually impede progress, it stops the usage, and it can actually create more issues for people with disabilities or additional needs. So
And
it's
if we approach those people because of their intent and not of their actions, that would be a positive interaction.
Yeah.
Which in my eyes is one of the ways of combating imposter syndrome.
Brilliant. And that's good to know. And it's just, yeah, it's I suppose we can only do what we want, what we can, and hope for the best as well. And I just hope that this kind of podcast, this content, is just going to do the thing that I intend it to do, and that's raise awareness. I just want people to know and be talking a bit more about accessibility and what we can be doing. So um, brilliant. But as we all know, so I work as a recruitment consultant in the digital technology development and obviously accessibility space. So some of our listeners are those aspiring designers, developers, and engineers. But could you give us an insight into what an average day, or a day probably isn't enough, so maybe a week, what that entails for you as the head of accessibility at Nomensa, and who are the key sort of people that you would interact with on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think I can run you through that. It's probably more meetings than I'd like to be than I'd like it to be to be honest. But yeah. So, but in all seriousness, so as head of accessibility, like I have a couple of responsibilities. So there's of course a series of internal meetings around things like scheduling, and basically making sure that our team has all of the time and the resources they need to deliver excellent work. So there's some internal logistics going on there. Um, I also join in on a lot of our initial sales conversations with current and potential clients, helping to outline, of course, our services and like determining how best we can support them on their accessibility journey. Um, Luckily, also get to still work with some of our own like amazing clients actively as a practitioner, and that pretty much ranges across all of our services. So they could be doing an audit. I have a couple of training sessions coming up this week as we talk pre-show, which I'm currently doing prep for. Could be like general consultancy type things where we just have an hour-long session with a client and they bring whatever they're currently struggling with to the table, which to me are the most fun because it's on the spot thinking and interacting and collaboratively coming up with a solution with a client instead of them just telling them this is how you should do it. I'm very much like a progress over perfection type of guy. So I'd rather see we make small steps to improve than try and solve a problem in one go. So yeah, it's anything really to help solidify our clients' knowledge within their teams. For me, the goal is always to, like I said, it's their accessibility journey. So it's about me or our team rather helping them along the way to self-sufficiently be able to make the correct steps, which also means that we can build more awareness and accessibility capability with hopefully another client while confidently um, like taking the wheels off
Yeah.
with a current client.
Take the training wheels off, let them go on their
No,
own, and see if, yeah, hopefully they stay up on two wheels. But brilliant. And that's, I guess, you would therefore be interacting with all manner of roles. So I suppose developers that are struggling to understand what they need to change within their code
yeah,
examples. You'd have designers at the initial stage where I guess you would hope the conversation is starting when it comes to accessibility or inclusive design. And even I suppose through to testers, or maybe even risk managers and things, and compliance. Is it across the board
yeah,
basically that you would
it's pretty
discuss?
much across the board. Like you said, it's developers, testers, QA, but also raising awareness with SLT or CSU departments to, because in the end, I very much believe that you need is it a pinch remover, like a two-way approach. You need both a top-down support and you need a bottom-up foundation to like properly implement a well-rounded accessibility program. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty much chatting to anyone I can speak to, really.
Anyone that will listen, which is good.
Anyone that will listen, yes.
And I think it's important, like you said, to attack it from all angles. And then I suppose you have the top-down approach for decision makers, because they need to be aware that this is something that's actually going to benefit overall, and they will be the ones that say yes or no to any changes you're hoping to implement or advise upon. So very interesting stuff. I'm sure you've had some challenging conversations in your day-to-day work as well.
They can be challenging, yes, but they can also be really engaged. And like people um, people often think that it's like, yes, of course, it's also about the money, always, because like it's a business, right? It makes sense. But at least the clients that we work with, which I don't know, they probably won't go for every client, but the clients that we work with are all very much engaged and invested in wanting to better their product
Yeah.
for a wider group of people. And it's not only the wider group of people, but it's providing a better experience for all of their clients, which they are more than keen to explore avenues once once you put in like, not sure if framing is the correct word, but yeah, it's about painting the right picture.
Yeah, definitely. At least giving that, sort of planting that seed, and then they can hopefully make some more informed decisions
Yeah.
themselves as well, isn't it? Excellent. Good stuff. And so you gave a great talk recently on the global regulations in place for digital accessibility. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do the whole thing again, um,
Phew.
just for our audience. But I wanted to touch on that point in general, though, because seeing as today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and there are so many companies, speakers, and advocates sharing advice and tips on how to gain buy-in for accessibility. Unfortunately, one tactic that has always been useful, I wouldn't say successful, but across most sectors, is the kind of scare tactics, or always pushing on the risks that are involved. So on that point, do you feel that the current regulations across the globe, or the penalties that are in place, are justified, or are they strict enough to build that buy-in from business decision makers, like we were just discussing? Do you think you can scare people into change?
Not a really cookie cutter answer there to that question.
Mm,
Um, in the webinar, I dealt with the EU part of things, the UK and the US, which it's our three main markets. So that's but like it heavily depends on which market a company operates in. Um, in the US, as most people that have been in the accessibility space for a while probably know, but there's definitely it's a big, if not the biggest driver, because the risk of getting sued is far bigger, and the costs involved quickly amount to a rather substantial sum of figures.
mm,
Um, Both in direct legal fees, like mostly the settlement fees are like lackluster at best, but all of the surrounding legal fees is what really drives the bill up. But there's also all of the resulting reputational damage that a lawsuit brings with it. No company wants to be in the national newspapers because they've been sued because their website isn't accessible.
yeah.
Um, there might however, be a change coming. I mean, we've seen over the past years. like several thousand lawsuits being filed every year by what are so-called serial filers, which are plaintiffs that file multiple lawsuits in a certain period of time. And it looks like that it's going to be less effective. Like they might have the chance that um, their cases get approved for court might drop because they are serial filers. They are what the court is deeming like testers for accessibility, like, and they are debating whether that person would actually be a potential customer,
Right.
which is one of the more baseline requirements. Like, are you just trying to get something going here, or were you actually trying to order something, for example?
Mm.
So there might be a bit of a shift there. So it's interesting to see how that changes over the coming months or years. It's for sure an interesting change to keep ourselves informed of. In the UK and the EU markets, though, the chances of getting sued are extremely low. Um, there's just differences in legal systems, and like someone needs to go through multiple steps before a case even goes to court. Like there's in the UK, there have been court cases, and some, or at least there's been cases filed. To my knowledge, they've all been settled outside of court. Um, no figures. They're all uh, settled behind closed doors. Um, but I know the Royal National Institute of the Blind was involved with a couple of those.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, before you get there, like, you need to start filing formal complaints and start to get a conversation going with a supplier to actively sort it out before they would probably actively say, no, we don't want to make this accessible for you, before you get to a certain point where, okay, I have something, I feel discriminated, and I can go to court, right?
Mm.
And there's the EU Accessibility Act coming up, which allows people to start filing cases with their national courts probably more easily, but I don't see it changing massively, because the same steps of approaching a supplier and starting to work with them, and then like the situation would need to come to a halt before you would be able to still progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is still like the perspective itself, the legal perspective is still a good topic of conversation, especially with senior leadership teams, as it's also their responsibility to comply with the law. So
Mm.
even though the chance of a lawsuit is rather slim, again, reputational damage is always something they are cautionate about, because those like those things are their responsibility um, as well. So that's so it is definitely a topic I bring up in awareness conversations, um, as a bit of a starter, really, because once you've laid it out like that, there's like other, in my opinion, better foundations to continue the conversation afterwards,
Yeah.
including just making a better product.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think I was speaking to someone else recently. I think it may have been, I don't want to say names actually. There was someone I was speaking to that previously worked in the public sector for the Home Office and or one of the government bodies in the UK. And he was mentioning that the way that it is in the UK, at least, is that you would give formal warning to said company or public sector, and they would have sort of 3 months for them to be able to sort of come to a solution, go back to the the user or whoever's made a complaint, and say, we've tried this. Does this make it better for you? So there's an awful lot of time for people to be able to go, oh, actually, we should do something about this, rather than, right, you're going to court next week, so you need to buck your ideas up and have someone that's able to make this change immediately. So yeah, I suppose it's like you say, it's a good conversation starter. No one wants to go to market and go, hey, look, we had all these complaints from people that can't use our product. Do you want to buy it?
Exactly.
It's that's probably the better way to phrase it, I suppose. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, isn't it? But it's across both. I think you've mentioned public and private sector as well, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
been
and
in
the
those.
private sector is, of course, a bit more regulated in that sense. Like there's formal laws that they need to comply with, and those are actively being monitored. So, um, although I have some opinions about the monitoring system across both the UK and the EU market, but in general, it helped improve accessibility for residents to be able to use government services. So.
Going in the right direction, just
Yeah,
slowly.
slowly, and to my point, I still feel like it's very much um, a tick box exercise for quite a lot of organizations still, even in the public sector. It's like, okay, we've done this, and now we need to, like, they have a lot of responsibilities. I get that,
Mm.
and like balancing priorities, but we are moving forward. That's a good thing.
Yeah, take the small wins, I suppose. That's what we need to do, and
Like I
keep
said,
driving.
progress over perfection.
There you go, exactly. But brilliant. So that brings me on to a final question, and it's probably quite a ambiguous one, so don't feel too much pressure. But the final question I'm asking on each episode of the podcast is, what do you personally feel is one of the simplest, most cost-effective and convenient ways that anyone can implement more digital accessibility within their line of work or their daily lives?
Ooh. I mean, if you're interested in accessibility, and you're like the individual, just start talking about the topic with colleagues. Get that conversation going. Realize that that accessibility in itself never sits with a single point in the process. So everyone can play their part. Everyone can improve accessibility and inclusion in your product. That could be your co-developer or the designer that you're having a chat with, or the user researcher. Um, everyone can do this. Like if you're a researcher, include people with access needs in your user base. If you're a designer, like think of different interaction types. Start annotating your designs with accessibility requirements, so a developer won't go asking for them, but already knows, like, okay, this is component X, and I need to take these considerations into account when I start implementing it. On the other side, if you're a dev with an accessibility passion, ask for those annotations. Make sure that you get delivered what you need to, or like clearing up any any uncertainty on how a component should operate, like what kind of functionality should you implement, and then you can start thinking, okay, if I need to implement it in this way, then I need to account for X, Y, Z when it comes to accessibility.
Mm.
So it's really about collaboration in that sense. Other things like just stick to standards, use proper HTML, because you get a lot of accessibility for free that way. If you're on the business side, say you're dealing with procurement, like start including questions on accessibility whenever you procure a new product, and don't be afraid to either settle for the initial answers, because if you ask, do you know how to do accessibility, like a company that replies to your bid will always say yes.
Mm.
So always dive deeper into, give examples, show me why you're good at this. If you can, ask like for an audit report from the supplier, um, so you don't have to pay one for yourself once you've procured it, because then you're stuck with a product which is likely inaccessible. Um, I'm secretly hoping that like the VPAT, the Voluntary Product Accessibility Template, gets more traction in the UK and the EU from suppliers. Like that that's a document that outlines all of the accessibility features and limitations of a product. So if you as a buyer then should be fully informed, okay, this is the current state, and you can make an informed decision based on that. Uh, in the end, everyone can make a big impact. Just take small steps.
Brilliant. Progress, not perfection. There we go. It's
100%.
something that, just to touch on that as well, it's something that we've had to do relatively recently. So PCR Digital completely revamped and redesigned and developed our website to ensure that we are, practicing what we preach. I've specialized in digital accessibility recruitment, so having a website that may not have been fully accessible to some people wouldn't
Yeah.
make sense. It would look awful. So we went out to suppliers, we went to web development agencies, and we interviewed each of them and asked them those specific questions. And like you say, everyone will say yes. We've done that before, of course we have. Yeah, it's fine, buy our product. But we delved in a little deeper. It helped that I knew the fundamentals, what to ask. So I completely agree. And I think, yeah, just talking about it is what I'm trying to do. So, and obviously, as people probably know by now, I like to talk. So it's a good
That
thing.
helps.
Yeah. But final thoughts. So, yeah, I guess just take some time to share anything of real importance to you at the moment, either within accessibility or something in your own personal life.
I think I'll just reiterate what I just said. I think I see a lot of people in our space getting, like the accessibility space, getting burned out, because they're not just seeing enough progress. People like we said this when talking about social media, but we're all fighters. We all want to see things change, and we want to see change quicker. But we need to keep in mind that every step taken, like every person you talk to that did not know about accessibility yesterday, and you've spoken to them today, he now does, and that is still progress. Um, it's difficult, I'll be honest, to keep that mindset going, especially if you've been in a space, and or you see like hard work that you've done over the years be torn down in a matter of months with a reorganization, or it can be a very big struggle. Um, but every step is progress.
Amazing. Perfect. I mean, I was going to finish with the quote, and I'll mention it because it touches on something you said. But I love that, and I might even quote you in future episodes to say, Ronny Hendriks once said, "Every step is still progress." So you will be
I don't.
featured in a
I've
future.
definitely not come up with that one, but
Well, it's a great line, so I'll definitely be using it somewhere. But so one of the quotes that I've sort of come across in my own line of work, working with certain companies for their recruitment needs, it was Tim Cook, CEO of Apple. Once upon a time said that accessibility is not a feature, it's a mindset, which I think reinforces a lot of what we've discussed today, that it's for and about everyone, not just those who we perceive to have disabilities, but we really need to think about what we're doing for our users, and that's everyone. And that way we could just drive growth and innovation by including everyone, and allowing them barrier-free access to products, services, and technologies that we create. Um, but yeah, so thank you so much again, Ronny, for
it's
joining
been
me
an
on the
absolute
episode
pleasure.
today. It's always great speaking with you, and I've gained a little bit more knowledge, and hopefully everyone else listening will do too. Thank you also for the incredible work that you're doing with Nomensa and in the space. Um, there's a lot of people out there that are aware of you and your ambitions and goals, and hopefully they'll reach out to you directly if they've got any questions or need a nudge in the right direction.
Yeah, by
I'm
all
sure
means
you'd
do.
be happy.
I think the best place would be LinkedIn. Honestly,
Yeah.
I've stepped away from. I have a Twitter account, but I've properly stepped away from most social media. So
Yeah.
LinkedIn will be the easiest way to reach me. But yeah, by all means, reach out. Always happy
Perfect.
to chat and help people along.
Brilliant. Thank you so much again, Ronny. And yeah, I'll share any links to any sites and resources that we've discussed today in the episode, along with the link to this. I look forward to staying in touch with you as well moving forward. But thanks again. Been a pleasure.
Likewise. See you around.
thank you once again to Ronny and Nomensa for joining us on this episode today. I hope that Ronny's stories provided some insight into how everyone's story is different when it comes to digital accessibility and working within this space. If you also suffer with RSI or imposter syndrome, or have been affected in similar ways to Ronny or myself, please reach out, as we'd be more than happy to help wherever we can. You can reach Ronny on LinkedIn, just search for Ronny Hendriks or click on the profile link that I'll provide within this episode to connect with him. As a reminder, PCR Digital provide bespoke recruitment and resourcing solutions for clients large and small. We've helped to fill difficult positions with permanent staff and contractors in the tech space, including iOS, macOS and Android developers, accessibility professionals at all levels, software engineers and developers, project and program managers, business analysts, IT support professionals, content designers and managers, as well as testers and technical analysts. If you'd like to hear more about our services and how we can help take the stress of recruitment and resourcing away from you, just get in touch via the links provided, visit us at pcrdigital.com or call the office on 0207 479 7980. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.